Let's get back into the routine of the season. That means that this is a Talkin' Tuesday as Ohio State gets ready for Marshall back on Saturday in the Horseshoe at noon. That's Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. This is the Podcast Daily. We're going to have Ryan Day in the team room at the Woody. We're going to have Chip Kelly, and we're going to have Will Howard. So a very offensive heavy, quarterback heavy conversation coming. We'll have that stream on the podcast channel as always later on at noon. But more important, we need to hear what Bill Landis is going to ask those people so that we can be informed and educated.
Yeah, I feel the off week coming as early as it did feels like it's thrown me off my game too. I feel like less informed and educated at this point about Ohio State season than I think I typically am. There are a couple things on my mind. Some more like player specific, but I guess to start with something that's not as player specific is I think Ryan Day I remember him saying at Big Ten Media Days, I think he might have said it a couple of times during camp. And then he actually mentioned it again last week on his radio show. It's like about continuing to find the things that Ohio State's offense feels like it's best at and then sort of building from there. And I wonder if that was any part of the frustration of not having a game last week, is that it seemed like maybe they were starting to hit on some of that against Western Michigan, and then obviously didn't have a chance to continue building on it this past weekend. So, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they weren't hitting on it. It felt to me, and maybe I won't speak for you, but it felt to me like maybe like all the RPO stuff we saw in that game is more or less who they want to be. But I am finding myself wondering, I guess, like, one, how that process is going, two, how long it typically takes, and three, if this kind of weird interruption early on in the season impacts that kind of journey negatively in any way. Like, Ohio State is not alone in trying to figure out what its identity is. I think even some teams that have played some bigger games to this point are probably still wondering that themselves. But given all the transition on the offense already with the new offensive coordinator, new quarterback, and all that stuff, I'd imagine that process is a little more complicated than it typically is for Ohio State. So now that they're getting back into it and they're going to have a run of like 4 or 5 games here uninterrupted, I just want to know, like, where they think they are in trying to figure that out, and where or what maybe they think they need to get done this week with one last opportunity before Big Ten play.
Yeah, it felt like the jump from Akron to Western Michigan, especially offensively, with leaning into some of that RPO stuff, was like a eureka moment for Chip Kelly and Ryan Day. And that's like, Will Howard can do this. He can process it. We can put more on the plate, and it's going to make Ohio State really difficult to defend. I think we talked about that a little bit during improvement week last week. And I think that there was maybe some sense from people that, well, that feels like an overreaction. It was just Akron. It was just Western Michigan. Like, how do you know that Ohio State has everything figured out? It's not a suggestion that they're done. I think that's what's got me excited about watching them do things differently from week 1 to week 2, and what that could have been or will still be as they get into a third game and a fourth game. I think that there are areas where Ohio State can improve. Zach Bourne brought this up on the Monday edition of the Daily. Like, have they run between the tackles enough, or to a level that you'd feel really good about them in that situation, or short yardage? Probably not. They can still get to that. And in some ways, I feel like that's nitpicking, but we do a lot of that. And no team is ever going to be perfect at doing every single way of moving the football. Like, every concept, you're not going to be good at that. So, like, to your point, Bill, if you figure out what it is that suits the personnel, build around that, and enhance some of the weaknesses and improve them. I'm not even calling running between the tackles a weakness for Ohio State. We don't really know against a better opponent yet, and we haven't seen Donovan Jackson play at all. But it wasn't maybe the way I described it last week, or in some of the shows we did, made it sound like, well, they're unstoppable. I don't know. That would be fair. Maybe I got a little too excited or hyperbolic about it, but I didn't mean it to be like, well, they don't have to do anything better for the rest of the year. I am like just excited to see where it's going to go, because a lot of the things that they did against Western Michigan were new concepts that clearly Chip Kelly and Ryan Day have come together and believe that Will Howard can execute them. So that's it. It wasn't like, well, the season's over, they're going to win the national championship because they beat 2 MAC teams. That's not how I feel. It's just I'm like, this offense feels like it has a lot more to tap into than even some of the other Ryan Day versions we've seen.
Yeah, I think it's okay to get excited about when a team scores darn near every time it has the ball, right? For as good as Ohio State is and has been offensively under Ryan Day, it's not like that happens every week. I don't care who the opponent is. So when they come out as hot as they did against Western Michigan, while being noticeably different, I think, sort of ideologically on offense with some of the stuff they were doing and schematically like that. I think it's okay. It's okay to extrapolate that over the course of the season and get excited about it. I know that I was. But yeah, I don't know. I think my guess is a lot of what we saw against Western Michigan is probably who they want to be. I do find it interesting. Like Ryan Day said to us last week when we did talk to him during the off week, and then again on his radio show, that there's more to come. Like there's more to add on top of it. So maybe that was just sort of like the base layer that we saw against Western Michigan, and that is sort of like the foundation of who they want to be with a lot of what we saw in the run game and kind of always marrying a run and a pass together a lot of the time. And then they continue to build concepts off of that or change the way all that stuff is dressed up. It's just hard to say because of the really odd pause in the middle of all that offensive momentum. So, and if they come out and do it again against Marshall and do it as efficiently as they did against Western Michigan, that'll certainly mean something to me. I think Marshall defensively is certainly a step up from Western Michigan. I'd have to look a little closer to see whether it's a step up from Akron, but I don't think it's a total pushover as a defensive program. So success there is not, entirely sort of meaningless if you try to extrapolate it out to Big Ten play, but it's more about what they try to do, I think, than or how they try to do things, and then like maybe ultimately how successful it is, if that sounds right. So I'm wondering about identity and how you build upon it from here, and probably a part of that equation is you mentioned like Donovan Jackson not playing, right? So how much of that foundation are you laying without a pretty pivotal piece of your offensive lineup? Not that a one guard changes everything you're going to do. I'm not trying to put too much on it, but I guess technically Ohio State has not been a complete product yet personnel wise, and we expect that it will be when the Marshall game comes up. So how they integrate Donovan Jackson back into the lineup, I think is probably worth getting into a little bit this week, because Ryan Day has said that like Austin Saraveld's played well, that he's deserved playing time, which I agree with, but I don't think that means a rotation at left guard, and I don't think that means I'm assuming that means like when the opportunity presents itself to play younger guys, Austin Saraveld will be in the game pretty early, but I don't know, maybe they have more of a ramp up kind of plan for Donovan Jackson going into the Marshall game rather than just throwing him out there and letting him play the whole game with the ones. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think outside of the big picture stuff, I mean, you drill down and you look at Donovan Jackson. Is he going to need to play every single snap against Marshall? You would think not. Is it beneficial for him to take on more than you would otherwise because you're going on the road for a Big Ten game the next week? Maybe so. Donovan Jackson has played a lot of football, but he hasn't, and he's practiced a decent amount, but he has not played at game speed in a game timing for game duration, all those things yet this season. So that's difficult. We talked about that in week 1. Like that transition out of training camp into a games is hard. So you certainly don't want to put Donovan Jackson in a situation where he's trying to play catch up when you go play in East Lansing. I don't know what the line would be. I guess I'm curious what Ryan Day and Chip Kelly would say about that for this week, because that is the last piece of that starting lineup that we project. And it's the really only intrigue for me in terms of personnel this week, at least on offense. Mm-hmm. There may be some on special teams that we've talked about, and with Ryan Day looking at kickoff return, but what does it mean to get Donovan Jackson back? How much of that do they think would have impacted the way that they called games, the run game between the tackles? If that's something that they, want to emphasize more with Donovan Jackson's back, didn't enter into their thoughts at all because Austin Saraveld was playing fine without him. Like, that's probably like, as you mentioned, even if you're saying this, then it must be true. One guard is maybe not going to change the entirety of the offense, but this is a very good one. He's probably got the best, NFL grades on this Ohio State roster for the offensive line going into the year. So I'm a lot more curious about that than I would be normally, certainly for a game against Marshall.
Maybe it'll turn out that they are building the whole thing around Donovan Jackson, and it'll look vastly different when we watch them play on Saturday. I think that's probably not the case. Ryan Day did say last week that like Donovan Jackson could have played, but they didn't want to play him on a pitch count, which to me says like if he is going to play, then he's just going to play, and there's not going to be any kind of thought to it other than that. So I'd imagine that's what we'll see, and then maybe the game will get out of hand. I guess the better question might be like, if the game gets out of hand, do you play him longer than you would otherwise because he hasn't played yet? So we'll see. Maybe the game will get to that point. I have a sneaking suspicion that it might, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
I think that's an interesting point, though, Bill. I want to finish that thought because we may or may not get an answer on this, and I wonder if this is not. I don't want this to be a conversation about the availability report. Like, I've come to accept the terms of engagement here, but if there's a world where he could have played and he was on a pitch count, does that mean that is still a decision that's influenced by what happened with Jackson Smith and Jigba 2 years ago? As a change in philosophy, I don't want to get into it. I know that there's no real point in getting into injury conversations with Ohio State and Ryan Day. They've got the way that they want to do it, and that's fine. I'm not going to change their mind, no matter how many times I make that case on the podcast daily or directly to those people who are making those decisions. But like, I don't know, maybe new CEO version of Ryan Day has a different perspective on that. I don't know. I guess I need to test the waters on that.
Maybe. I mean, they got burned in like the most high profile way possible the last time they tried to probably play a guy earlier than they should have. So I would understand if that has had a lingering impact on the way they choose to handle things moving forward. That would be a good question. Yeah, I think it's often foolish endeavor, I guess, to try to ask about.
I don't want to be called a fool. Futile.
No. Futile. Sorry, that was not a comment on you. That was a comment on the way that Ohio State chooses to answer things. But it's probably worth asking. I mean, and I guess like if they were playing Notre Dame last week, I think Donovan Jackson would have played, right? But I guess they are probably being a little more cautious than they would have otherwise. Although I thought they were going to be cautious with Cody Simon too, and then like once he was healthy, he played 30-something snaps, right? So, yeah, I don't know. It's probably worth getting into. I'm like, it's not a glaring personnel thing. It's more just like a curiosity of wondering where things are going, or if philosophy might evolve over the course of the season. But like, they're definitely still doing I don't even know if it's hot hand, but they're rotating pretty evenly at tight end. If there's any thought to wanting to pare that down at some point, it's practically even, at least according to Pro Football Focus, between Jelani Thurman, G. Scott, and Will Kasmerick for snap counts. I think it's 44 for Jelani, 43 for G, and 42 for Will. That might be off a snap or two. So I think it's fine to say it's even, basically. Mm-hmm. If they think that's going to be the way of it for the entire season, or if there is any opportunity for, I guess, two of those guys maybe to rise above the rest of the group and start playing more, because even Bennett Christian's not that far behind. I know there's been some lopsided games that have allowed him to play a little more, but he's at like 20 something, I think almost 30 snaps. So there's just a lot of guys playing there, which we anticipated coming into the season. And I know they've only played 2 games, but I'm wondering if they thought coming into the year, like eventually that would settle out on one or two guys would play more, or if they're perfectly fine with it being a committee approach for most of the season.
I mean, we kind of thought that was going to be the case, right? When we did, tight end position previews, it's like, well, there's more playable depth and maybe the high end upside that Cade Stover brought to most everything, and you can, quibble with perimeter blocking and those sorts of things if you want, and that would be within bounds to do so. But like, they relied on him to carry the whole load, and none of these guys really have Cade Stover's collective skill set. And I I think that's fine. You mentioned Bennett Christian. We've seen him go in the game in a couple different situations early on. It's not like all of his reps are coming in the second half when the game is decided. I'm not even just talking about the 14 personnel package. I mean, they put him in to do some work as a blocker, and that's encouraging. And if Jelani Thurman is capable of balancing out that workload right alongside Kazmarek and G. Scott, good. Like I have felt like the tight ends as a whole have, if not exceeded, at least met expectations for the first couple of weeks. And maybe we talk about that position group too much. I think maybe there's a world where we don't talk about them enough, given what Chip Kelly and Ryan Day like to do offensively. But I'm fine with the way that they're handling it. And if all four of those guys can contribute in the way that those reps are being doled out, I mean, I think that that's good for them over the length of the season. As demanding as that position is physically, it just wasn't fair or rational or reasonable to expect Cade Stover to do it all. And you saw the decline. I think some of the criticisms that happen with Cade Stover with perimeter blocking is not because he is incapable, and he's already doing a lot of really good blocking now that he's in Houston and doing fullback stuff. Like, they trust him to do that. I think that it was just a steady decline in production and blocking throughout the year. And I know we could find clips in September of last year where maybe he missed a block, and that's fine. I'm talking about overall over the course of the year, once the injuries mounted up and the wear and tear, as hard of a worker as he is and as relentless and tough and badass as Cade Stover is, they were asking way too much of him over the last 2 years. And that was just not sustainable for anybody. And I think the offense suffered as a result of it.
Yeah, I think it's probably nice for Cade Stover to be in Houston with Dalton Schultz, another tight end who can play, because he just didn't really have that in his time here. No, I don't bring it up because I have an issue with it either. I guess I only bring it up because it just feels so foreign, because we don't typically see Ohio State do that, and specifically at this position, it hasn't done it for a couple of years. Obviously, when Jeremy Ruckert and Luke Farrell were here, they played two tight ends together a lot, but also like had two guys they clearly trusted. I don't know that this group collectively is at that level of the Farrell Ruckert level, but right. I think they have played well through two games. There was definitely a chance that even if Ohio State was playing really well overall, we could look at that group and be like, "Ooh, I don't know, that doesn't look very good right now." But I don't think that's nearly been the case. I think they've probably met expectations, and in some cases, perhaps exceeded them. It's going to be a very important group for this offense moving forward. I mean, the tests that they're going to face coming down the road are going to be a little stiffer than what they've seen so far. So maybe I'm getting into more of like a general assessment of tight end play, which Ryan Day has been asked about a couple of times already. But I think too, just like monitoring who among that group rises to the top will be interesting throughout the year. But that's like almost. That's like searching for a personnel thing, kind of like really outside of Donovan Jackson coming back, which isn't a question of like ability or whatever. It's just like, okay, you got all your guys back. What's this going to look like? There's really not a whole lot of pressing stuff. I think honestly, more than both of those things, kick returner might be more pressing, right? Like if they're going to make a change there, I think I don't know who it's going to be. I thought it was interesting that Ryan Day, he might have been asked specifically about it on the radio show, but Mylan Graham's name was at least mentioned in the same sentence as returning kicks. So it was like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. So whether it's him or Carnell Tate or giving Brandon Innes a shot, or Lorenzo Styles has lobbied for it in the past, like I do think we're going to see somebody new there, and I think that will be maybe the best sign yet that they're taking special teams a little more seriously than they have the last couple of years, if they're going to make a change there that quickly based off what we saw in the last game.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's why I'm really intrigued to see how that plays out this week, because it feels wrong to say it this way, but like they let the problem on special teams fester because they did not make dramatic changes to the coaching staff and they didn't really alter the personnel. Like, you're basically condoning it and embracing that's just the way it is. Special teams are going to have breakdowns. Oh, well, we'll get it back on offense and the defense is too good. That doesn't make any sense when you're talking about talent equated games, and Ohio State hasn't played them yet. You say, well, maybe they'll be just fine in those opportunities, work out the kinks. If you have a problem in these games against the lesser competition, you're finding out the information that you're trying to use to project forward to the biggest games. Jim Knowles talked about that, where he was saying, I'm not happy with this right now. I'm already seeing some things formationally that can be a problem, and I'm trying to figure out how teams are going to attack. And we've heard Chip Kelly talk about evolving the offense, and Ryan Day talked about this last Tuesday and trying to find out the things that work and what teams are going to want to take away from them and projecting that forward. I would have to say that it's about time that they start doing that on special teams. Like, I don't think that it's going to like magically heal itself, because it's been going on, not just a touchdown drought for 10 years. Let's put all of that aside. It's a stupid thing to focus on, even though other teams are able to score and create explosive plays. I'm just talking baseline competence in the return game. It's been going on for far too long. And this is not a knock on Jaden Ballard's athleticism or anything along those lines, because we've all seen him do bonkers things on the practice field. And I understand wanting to give opportunities. He had a great offseason. Maybe this is the moment that he taps into that potential and great things happen. Well, how many chances do you get? And that's, I don't know why you would let that linger when there are other people on this roster who are also incredibly gifted athletes, and you're trying to figure out and find solutions. And I agree with you completely. This will be another test, another barometer of Ryan Day's CEO approach. And he has made a point himself to talk about how much more involved he is on special teams. And I guess we're going to find out if that's really the case.
Yeah, I think we will. I would be surprised if we don't see a change. I don't have a great feel yet for who it will be. I would hesitate to say like definitively I think it's going to be this guy. So, but Ryan Day has been pretty open about this stuff so far. So I think he might tell us if we ask him later on Tuesday.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not up to us, right? Like I think letting Brandon Ennis do both would be a fine way to get to squeeze a couple extra touches out of him. The Mylan Graham idea is certainly enticing based on what we saw in August from him and what the physicality. Like, I thought Lorenzo Styles would be a good pick. It really doesn't matter to me who it is. It can be Jaden Ballard again on Saturday. If they went through practices last week and like, hey, this can't happen, and maybe it was just a miscommunication with the rules on the fair catch, like, fine. It makes no difference, but the outcomes can't remain the same, because Ohio State can't afford, and it has proven that itself in the biggest games, namely in 2022, that wasting 4 or 5 plays on special teams can cost you a championship. So, like, it feels crazy that I'm even still talking about it right now as we roll along here, but like, maybe we won't have to after Saturday, and that would be great too.
Yeah, I think we are getting ever closer to that reality, and thank God that we are, because, they've not taken it seriously enough, but I think they are. I have an idea though on special teams. If you want to reward a guy who stepped up into a big spot, but now might be getting pushed back a little bit because of a returning starter, let Austin Saraveld return kicks.
There it is. He's earned the right.
He's earned the right to play.
We came out of improvement off date, and we talked about Ohio State's offensive line, tight ends, and special teams. I don't know that we got any better. We just might be in a rhythm. That's the only thing that we know how to talk about.
We are who we are. Yeah.
But
unapologetically.
You know what? That means that there's still an opportunity this week for us to improve as Ohio State gets ready for Marshall. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. Maybe snap judgments will just be about Donovan Jackson and the tight ends. Stay tuned for that. We'll find out later on today, which is Tuesday. Thanks for starting the day with us. Again, there's going to be full coverage of the press conference. Chip Kelly, Ryan Day, Will Howard. We'll have snap judgments afterwards, and then we'll be back with the podcast daily for Wednesday. That'll be, who knows? We already did stock watch last week, so we'll figure out what that is when the time comes, and you can find out with us right here on the podcast, wherever you are getting us on YouTube or any of the audio platforms. We appreciate you. Like and subscribe. Berm wanted me to make sure that you know that. You can do that. You can click the buttons. It's a thumbs up or a bell, and it really helps us out. So thanks for doing that if you did. And if not, well, we'll try better next time. That's Bill Landis, and I'm Austin Ward. This has been the Podcast Daily. We'll talk to you later.